recognize the ranking member of the full Judiciary Committee, Mr. Jordan from Ohio, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would slightly disagree with the statement, Mr. Smith. What our democracy depends on is the First Amendment. Not necessarily journalism is fine, it's all part of it as long as they're actually adhering to the First Amendment. Mr. Travis, at the end of your statement, you said, I'm a First Amendment absolutist and I believe cancel culture intertwined with identity politics is the greatest threat to our country. I could not agree more. Do you have a functioning First Amendment when only one side's allowed to talk? Do you have free speech when big tech, big media, and big government decides what can be said and what can be seen?
No, you don't.
Not at all.
Not at all. And I think that is the major issue that our country is facing today.
Yeah, more important than this broad concept of journalism, which I'm all for, it's the First Amendment, the right to speak and to speak in a political nature and not be censored for speaking out in a political fashion. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Shabern said in his opening statement that this bill would have high-quality professional journalism would be able to form in this consortium and cartel. Is Outkick high-quality journalism?
I would like to think so. Some would disagree.
Who gets to decide? Who defines what's high-quality journalism?
Well, I think that's one of the big challenges, is determining what is and what is not high-quality journalism. Some of the most high-quality journalism that we have seen over the years that has been praised has ended up not being true. Yeah, and that is why we need such a robust First Amendment in general, so that our battles, the marketplace of ideas, is not being artificially constrained, which is what I believe is happening now.
The market's supposed to decide what is and define what is high-quality journalism. The First Amendment decides that, not government. Is that right?
I think that's correct. Yes, sir.
You said something earlier, too. You said, who fact-checks the fact-checkers? Who's supposed to do that?
It's fascinating. In my example, Facebook has flagged 2 different stories at Outkick as disinformation and destroyed our traffic as a result. The first one was linking to the CDC website. We appealed and said, how can you make this determination? The second one, as I said, was pretty straightforward. We linked to a Wall Street Journal editorial from a high-end medical scientist analyzing COVID. Both of those were flagged. We lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue because of Facebook's fact-checking decision. There was no appeals process. They don't even bother responding to us.
But in a general sense, Mr. Travis, isn't it supposed to be the First Amendment that also fact-checks the fact? More speech, right? I mean,
yes.
A number of Democrats have quoted Justice Brandeis. Justice Brandeis said, if there's, quote, misinformation or disinformation out there, the answer is not to squelch that and stop that. The answer is to allow more speech to happen, i.e. the First Amendment, correct?
That is the entire theory of Justice Brandeis's view of the First Amendment, and also the entire basis of the marketplace of ideas.
Mr. Shabern, do you think the London Times thought Thomas Paine was a high-quality journalist?
I'm not sure I could answer that. I'm not trying to respond to that, Mr. Jordan. What I can say is that I represent a vast array of points of view in my membership. Okay. And every one of them has a problem with the marketplace for their content that they invest in greatly. And it's not working for
I'm not saying there's not a problem. I'm all for using antitrust to go after the big tech companies. I'm all for doing 230, something we could do right now. We could repeal 230, take away the liability protection. We could do that right now. If Democrats wanted to do that, we certainly do. We've introduced that legislation. I'm all for doing that. What I'm nervous about is this alliance between big government and big tech that Mr. Greenwald talked about. But I also wanted to go to Mr. Greenwald and talk about this other alliance, which I think is just as frightening, and that's the alliance between big tech and big government. Big tech and big government. In your statement, Mr. Greenwald, near the end of it, you said, a mere 2 months after Parler ascended to the top of the charts, members of Congress demanded that Apple and Google remove Parler from their stores and ban any further downloading of the app. We've seen maybe a better example. Just a couple weeks ago, Mr. Greenwald, we saw 2 Democrats send a letter to AT&T telling them to take certain networks off their, not be a carrier for certain networks. And I just want to read something to get your reaction to this. Because Mr. Travis said earlier, Mr. Greenwald, Mr. Travis said, we would all be rightly concerned if government was censoring speech and not big tech. But frankly, it's both. Big government censoring speech too, because we had 2 members, Democrat members of Congress, write to AT&T, and they said, we want a specific answer to this question. How many of your subscribers tuned into Fox News, Newsmax, One American News, on UVerse, DirecTV, AT&T TV for each of the 4 weeks preceding the November 3rd, 2020 election? Please specify the number of subscribers that tuned into each channel. So basically, tell us who your customers are, how many you have, and what they were watching. Mr. Greenwald, do you find that a little creepy and frightening like I do?
The time of the gentleman has expired, but the witness may answer the question briefly.
Very briefly, it goes to the heart of the concern that I have, which is I think there's a huge mismatch between the rhetoric that is being offered to justify this bill and what the bill does. If the concern is the failure of local newspapers, then give them the power to negotiate collectively, but not big media, which is so often embedded in the same problems that this committee is discussing.
The time of the gentleman has expired. He yields back. I now recognize